Good afternoon, everybody. There is nothing new in sexual abuse of minors. It's been going on forever, and sadly, it will continue. Nearly always, it's perpetrated by somebody who is very, very close or a trusted figure to the person being abused. It works because of secrecy and fear. The abused individual is told, if you say anything about this, I'll either hurt you or your parents, or do something awful to you. But the difference with what we call the grooming gang scandal is that it is the mass industrial scale sexual assault and rape by anonymous, unknown persons, and it's been going on across this country on a scale that is simply unimaginable. It has been going on for many, many decades. It has been going on for too long, and there is a huge racial and ethnic dimension to it. A very large part of these crimes can be attributed to racism in its absolutely worst possible form. And yet this has been met by the collective establishment, and by that I mean social services, police, councillors, members of parliament, governments, by abject cowardice and willful and deliberate neglect. And I first became aware of the scale of this when I went to Rotherham in 2013. And people were coming up and telling me what had happened in that town, the scale upon which it had happened. And I have to say that initially I looked upon it all with a degree of disbelief. Surely nothing as large as this, nothing as appalling as this, could have happened on this scale without it breaking as a massive public story beforehand. And by 2014, this was a national issue, one that had led to great anger in our country and much of the rest of the world looking on in absolute horror. They simply couldn't fathom that something like this had happened in the United Kingdom. And yet ever since then, there have been a few inquiries, but very little has happened. This is a stain on our country in every way. It's one of the worst things I think that has ever happened. And there's strong evidence that it's still continuing, and much of it within a few miles of where I'm speaking to you now. As a political issue, well, Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, can say what she likes. But as women's minister, for a period of 2 years, not one single time did she raise this issue in the House of Commons. And as far as Labour are concerned, well, it's clear, it's very, very clear. They have absolutely no desire for any serious inquiry to go ahead. I spoke this morning to the former police officer, Maggie Oliver, who's just about the only person who comes out well, frankly, from the last 20 years of all of this. And she made it pretty clear that Jess Phillips was in no way interested in meeting her at all. The inquiry is flawed. The inquiry will not work. And we want today to offer perhaps a better solution. But before I do that, I want to introduce you to one of the 5 people who was withdrawn from the inquiry. Ellie Reynolds has come down today from the north of London to stand up here and speak to a packed press conference. And she's going to talk about the inquiry, why she's withdrawn, her lack of trust and faith in the way in which the whole thing is being conducted. And I would ask everyone to bear in mind the immense courage that it takes for Ellie to come here and to do this today. Ellie.
Do you need to start that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Hello. First of all, I think the inquiry that was set up, it was a mess from the start. When I joined the panel, we knew from the get-go that it was messy. It was a very controlling atmosphere there. It was very gaslighting. very manipulative, and you know, we all went on to do the right thing, and that was to seek justice, that was to find the truth, to not be silenced anymore, and to be able to help our future. And you know, we look at our future generations in this as well, because not only are we about ourselves, but we're also about the present victims and the victims that can occur if this shambles continues. And the way that we were spoken to was very degrading. It was very controlling. We weren't allowed to seek support from family members. We weren't allowed to seek support from each and every survivor on the panel. Typically, you find with survivors is that they will confide in each other because we have been through near enough the same thing. So that is the better way that we can seek support. That was taken from us. There was a motivation in that as well to widen the panel, and I think personally that was down to the fact that they don't want to vocalise the ethnicity of these men. We almost felt uncomfortable vocalising the ethnicity of these men, and like we shouldn't. Pretty much when we were in that inquiry, we were stripped from our voices, and we're not going to be stripped from our voices anymore to maintain the higher-ups' comfortability. I decided to withdraw because, you know, my head and my heart were saying two different things. My head was saying, you can really make a change in this, you can really help the future. But in my heart, it wasn't morally correct for me to maintain myself on the panel because of how it was going. It was rigged from the start. I mean, when we got the bios about the former police officer and the former social worker, it was very, very locked down. It was very password protected. We couldn't show it to anybody. We couldn't screenshot it. It was just awful. And I mean, when you're looking at bios of two former institutions that failed us, we were never going to be confident in the first place. We've spent years of our lives trying to grab the attention from police officers and social workers, to be told that we're attention seeking, to be told to shut up and go home. It's been nothing but awful. So when you put these two candidates in front of us, none of the survivors were going to ever sit there and be happy with it. You know, personally, I asked and I said I'm not keen. However, we were also told to propose two questions to each suspected chair. They've left now, but we had to pose these questions 24 hours prior to meeting them, which again I wasn't happy with. I asked why they needed 24 hours. Why couldn't they come back with an answer instantly when they were asked it? We were told what to ask, when to ask it. It was all in all very controlled. And then to top it off, we also had then Jess Phillips calling us a liar in the House of Commons. And the way that she conducted herself alone was absolutely appalling. But to be called a liar by somebody so high up, we're used to it now. We've been called that all our lives. It's just awful that somebody had to do that and degrade us even more when she is a safeguarding minister. She should be safeguarding our children, protecting them. And I do not think that she's capable, which is also why I've called for her to stand down. Keir Starmer obviously had written a letter. I don't necessarily believe he wrote it himself, but that's my personal opinion. To which I replied, we don't want a polite letter. We want accountability. We want justice. We want the truth. And we want it to stop happening to our future. Our future is at risk the longer that this happens for. And we can't afford, I mean, what is it now? Approximately 250,000 victims across the country. That's 250,000 too many, in my opinion. It shouldn't have ever got to one. The scandal is now national. It's a problem and it needs to be fixed. So I withdrew myself because I know that I can make a change, just not through that panel. I will speak and I will raise awareness and I will say what's corrupt. And that inquiry, that was corrupt.
Very good. Wow. Thank you. That was pretty clear. Grab a seat and then we'll do questions.
Thank you.
Well, that was pretty straightforward and very clear. Well done, Ellie. This inquiry is dead in the water. Nearly 5 months have gone by, and what has happened? Nothing. They can't even agree who the chair is going to be. Starmer tells us that the Baroness Casey report forbids it from being a judge. If you read the report carefully, you'll realise that simply isn't true, which of course is in common with very many of the things that he says. 5 of the grooming gang victims, those that feel insulted, like Ellie, have withdrawn from the inquiry, but you'll be told, there are 5 who insist that Jess Phillips stays in place and that the inquiry continues. But here's the truth about the other 5. Just as I said at the start of this press conference, there are 2 very distinctly different groups of young people who were sexually abused and raped by adults. And what has happened with this inquiry is the government have quite deliberately, from the very start, widened the scope out from those who were victims of Pakistani grooming gangs and brought in other women. And by the way, I'm not demeaning or diminishing in any way the treatment that Samantha Walker and the other 4 have been through. I'm just pointing out they were victims, survivors now, of a very different kind of sexual abuse. And what the country demands, and indeed, what people like Ellie demand, is a laser focus on this very, very unique, and perhaps for many people, difficult to understand phenomenon that has now been going on in our country for decades. My own view is the government would like to simply kick the can down the road, to hold a public inquiry that goes on for such a long time that it concludes little or nothing before the next general election. You don't believe me? Well, have a look at the COVID inquiry, which goes on month after month, year after year, and which today, by the way, has just gone through £192 million in cost, making it even more expensive than the never-ending bloody Sunday inquiry. That is what we are into. And I want to propose today, a better, quicker, more open, and more transparent solution. The people of this country place their faith in elected politicians and in Parliament at every general election. Although I think it would be fair to say that that level of trust and faith is probably at the moment at an all-time low. So what I want to do is to offer Parliament a chance to re-establish itself in the minds of people as a good, fair and just institution. It's time for Parliament to step up and to do its job. Do you remember back in 2009 when Sir Fred Goodwin was ordered to appear before the Banking Commission, a new committee that had been set up between the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and Goodwin had to go to appear. And I just don't think we realise just how much power Parliament actually has if it chooses to use it. Select committees have the power to summon anybody. They could summon a former social worker. They could summon a former police officer. They could summon a former councillor. They could summon a former member of Parliament. And I find it hard to believe that MPs in all of these constituencies would not have had letters or emails or pointers as to what was going on. Because unlike the previous examples of sexual abuse that I've talked about, none of this was being hidden. There were groups of up to a dozen plus men waiting around in takeaway, kebab shops, taxi shops. Everyone in these communities knew that something was happening and that something was very, very wrong. So Parliament has that ability. It also has the ability to sanction those if anybody refuses to appear. It also has the power to require that people swear an oath. And the important thing about swearing an oath is that if what you say in that forum is deliberately misleading or untrue, well then, of course, you could face prosecution for perjury. These are the extraordinary powers that Parliament has if it chooses to use it. And I am saying here is the most enormous opportunity for Parliament, and indeed for this government, to restore some public trust in the institution and those that currently inhabit it on an issue that has been gnawing away at our public consciences for well over a decade. And I repeat the point, to which the rest of the world looks on in shock and in horror. I will be, with my colleagues, meeting the Speaker this evening. I will put these points to him. I know that he himself is very keen to re-establish Parliament at the centre of our national debate in this country. And I will tomorrow write to Dame Karen Bradley, the chair of the Home Affairs Committee, suggesting that very quickly a subcommittee is set up. And yes, let's broaden it to a commission, and let's get those from the House of Lords who understand this subject involved as well. The advantages of this, well, the first one is it can be done incredibly quickly. The second of this is it'll take place in what we still know as the mother of parliaments, and perhaps re-establish some trust in the institution. And it will happen in the full glare of media. And it won't take years to conclude. It will take many weeks. It might take a couple of months, but so be it. And it will have the power to put in the Palace of Westminster those who are suspected of colluding in the cover-up of one of the most shameful stories in the history of our islands. And I'll be putting all of that to the Speaker tomorrow, and I hope and expect to get other figures in public life to come out and support this idea. It can happen quickly. Let's make it happen. Thank you.